So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a very happy Diwali to everybody who is joining in to today, which is, I think, episode number 26 of the Unboxing AI webinar series. Yes, we've been doing this for the last 6 months now, and very excited to today have Dr. Larry Tanenbaum, Lawrence Tanenbaum, with us here on the webinar. For those of you who do not know, this is the Unboxing AI webinar series every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern. CARPL, which is your friendly neighborhood AI platform, call some of our friends, advisors, partners, collaborators, customers to share some insights and learnings about this so-called black boxed world of AI that we are trying to unbox. CARPL, as I mentioned, is a enterprise imaging AI platform, helps you navigate this entire complicated ecosystem of hundreds of AI developers, all trying to come into clinical workflows. And we serve as a single user interface, single data channel, and a single procurement channel. And as I mentioned, today we have the privilege of having Dr. Lawrence Tanenbaum, Larry, with us today. Thank you so much, Larry, for joining.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Happy Diwali.
Yes, no, thank you. And I'm dressed in full attire. I'm in office today, and we're having our Diwali party on. So yeah, so very exciting times here in India. You know, it's the Festival of Lights, as many of you may know.
Hopefully, I'll be getting a food delivery from the party at my front door as soon as this is
that is
over.
a good idea. That is a good idea, Dr.
I
Tanenbaum.
would like that.
Convey that. So before we proceed, quick introduction of our guest today, who maybe needs no introduction, but still, Dr. Tanenbaum is an active consultant in the imaging space. He's a long-term collaborator in the medical imaging industry, continues to chair advisory boards of OEMs, pharma companies, AI companies, what have you. He has interests in developing applications of AI in machine learning, contrast agents, MRCT, advanced visualization, advanced rendering. Professionally, he served as Vice President and Chief Technology Officer and the Director of Advanced Imaging at RadNet, which is the world's largest, I think, imaging center company from 2015 to 2024. And trained at Mount Sinai, where he then, he came in from Mount Sinai, where he attended in neuroradiology and served as an associate professor of radiology and director of MRCT and outpatient advanced imaging from 2008 to 15. Prior to that, 20 years in private practice. He's also passionate about advancing clinical practice of medicine, focusing on patient-centric care, efficiency, radiation dose, and physiologic imaging. Active educator, has authored over 100 articles who've been cited more than 2,000 times. I don't know from when this profile is. Maybe that number has increased. And continues to chair continues to chair educational and academic meetings and has delivered close to, oh my God, 2,000 lectures around the world. My God. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanenbaum, for joining here today. I can go on and on about you.
Oh, please do. Please do. My mom is listening in. I had her dial in. Just go for it.
I'm sure your mom is already plenty proud. But no, so and yes, for all of those joining in, as you know, and I see a lot of frequent names there. As you know, we always prioritize your questions over our discussions. To please ask ask away. But Larry, you know, you've been someone who has not only observed but also driven a lot of innovation in imaging over the years. The first time I heard about you was actually from my dad, several years ago. What have you seen in the last 5-7 years in imaging that has most excited you?
Well, we're here to talk about AI, so let's try and cast that question in terms of AI. I think the imaging space itself has had some developments, but mostly just incremental and progressive. But AI over the last 7 years has gone from something that really didn't touch our industry into something that is now essentially almost potentially the electricity or the motor oil behind a lot of what goes on in the imaging enterprise. I mean, that's really, in all honesty, I'm very excited about the fact that we're almost, in many cases, forgetting that it's AI behind it. But all of these AI fueled applications are just plugging in all throughout the enterprise. And I think that's really, really important. Now, there are applications like the ones that might fit in your platform, which might assist in the diagnostic space, things like triage apps and assistive reading apps, and we may get around to talking about dementia. But really, one of the rare circumstances where the applications are striving for and may eventually, hopefully soon, get cleared as a full CADx diagnostic product. But really, what I'm really impressed with is how in the imaging enterprise ecosystem, so many places where AI has improved the product or created the product that has made us more efficient, more cost effective, in many cases, more patient centric, just over the last 7 or 8 years. I think it's pretty impressive.
So, and Dr. Tanenbaum, we talked just prior to the webinar about dementia and how, there's a lot of change happening both on the pharma side and then AI applications trying to drive that. So, for the benefit of our viewers today and the audience that will listen to this after, could you give us a little bit of a spiel on what is happening in the world of dementia today and what's the role that imaging AI can play in it?
I'm impressed from your comments of your familiarity with the vernacular of American cartoons, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, all the way through a little bit of Yiddish you're throwing in here. Do you want to spiel on what's going on in Alzheimer's disease? I'm very impressed. I would say
I lived in Philadelphia for 2 years, so spiel
okay,
is in my blood.
okay. For the Philadelphia people, I'll ask you where your favorite cheesesteak is after we're done. But let's just say that dementia space is very exciting. It's very, very exciting in pharma, of course, because companies like Lilly and Eisai and Biogen are offering drugs to market that essentially attack and loosen the embedded amyloid in the brain of people with cognitive impairment. And the theory, although not universal, is that if you remove this amyloid, you can improve brain health. And as you know, there are 2 drugs currently approved on the market. They're given currently by infusion. They attack different steps in the pathway, but essentially they loosen the amyloid, which forms in the brain through sort of an imbalance of production and clearance. And essentially they loosen it and allow the brain's natural clearance pathways to wash that out. And the drugs have shown good results, particularly when used in the earlier cases, when they have a low amount of tau burden. Amyloid leads to tau. It's sort of a late stage of neurodegeneration. If you treat these people early, you actually can improve cognition and certainly arrest progression. So it's pretty exciting stuff. The problem is, and the reason why this is such an opportunity in the imaging space is when you loosen amyloid, it creates inflammation. Fortunately and unfortunately, most of the amyloid tends to deposit in the perivascular space, right? So if you cause inflammation in the perivascular space, you end up with leaky blood vessels. Blood vessels can leak edema on the surface of the brain or in the brain. In the brain, much more complicated because it can produce mass effect and the like. And it can produce hemorrhage on the surface of the brain, which may spread over the surface, like siderosis, or little microhemorrhages in the brain, again, which can also cause symptoms in certain circumstances. Being an inflammatory substance, these changes, hemorrhage and edema, euphemistically called ARIA, operatically, as I've heard expressed, amyloid-related imaging abnormalities, that are the focus of where the imaging enterprise comes in. We need to image patients for risk factors for bleeding, which is a major transition from where we were with Alzheimer's with dementia in the past, where we'd look for surgical causes of dementia, frontal meningioma, and the like. Now we're actually screening for the appropriateness and safety of therapy. And then we have to screen for the complications associated with therapy that I mentioned. And this has raised the amount of MR volume quite a bit, maybe 15 to 20% nationwide. And it's just sort of starting to escalate because we've gone from screening into surveillance type imaging. But it has also increased the amount of molecular imaging that's going on in this space as
Hmm.
well. We've shifted from where FDG might give you a bland picture of metabolism of the brain, useful in certain diseases like epilepsy and dementia, to agents now that are actually able to track the amount of amyloid in the brain and now quantitatively as an entry to this particular treatment pathway. The thing where AI fits, the area where AI fits into this space, which I'm very, very excited about, is in assisting the radiology community at detecting and quantifying these ARIA changes because it's very, very important. These drugs, when properly handled, have certain complications at a certain rate, but the fear is that catastrophic complications, though rare, can actually happen. So it's very important to do the appropriate monitoring and also to detect the complications as they occur, because there are certain guidelines that have been set down by the FDA and clinical societies as to when you would react, when you would suspend therapy, and what types of complications will allow you to continue therapy. And as you might imagine, there's risk associated with not following those guidelines, but there's awful lot of clinical patient and caregiver concern about where they fit in, what's happening with their individual exams, where you get an exam, they're wondering, will they be allowed to get the next therapeutic, the next infusion, because they're very invested in their care. Patients, particularly at this early stage, and their caregivers are very concerned. They want to be on this drug. They want to preserve brain function. They want the best that these drugs can give, so they're hanging on every thread. So efficient and accurate detection and quantification of these findings are really critically important. Now, all sounds pretty straightforward, except for the fact that even though that sounds very common, edema and hemorrhage, the actual findings of ARIA, how you quantify it, how you detect it, are relatively unfamiliar to the imaging community. Even the neuroradiology community, they're very unfamiliar too. And it's pretty clear from clinical trials with the AI tools which are designed to help with the detection and quantification of this condition that two things. One, we're doing a relatively poor job, even at the neuroradiology level. And two, that these tools can help be more accurate, add the quantification piece, which is critically important, and also make us more efficient in this, in this circumstance where we are already overburdened with case material, and now we'll have more, and also allow you to deliver something back to the patient in a more efficient fashion, in a more accurate fashion. It happens to be one of my favorite hot topics in imaging today, and it extends from the narrow neuroradiology community to the entire imaging enterprise, even the larger companies, like the RadNets and the Acumens and the Rad Partners that are busy doing, dealing with population health issues like this, and how they gear up and how they deal with it, and how they educate, and how they, ensure that the best possible quality and efficiency and service is delivered.
So, Dr. Tanenbaum, quick question on that. Like from a program or a programmatic perspective, like does every recipient of pharmaceutical therapy for dementia, is every recipient at risk of ARIA? So does every recipient of a drug require the screening? Like how does that work?
Well, that's a very interesting question because you reminded me of something that I should have spoken about. But yes, everyone is at risk. That's
Hmm.
pretty clear. But with certain genetic predispositions, your risk is a lot higher, right?
Oh.
With certain conditions in the brain, certain state of the brain before the treatment, your risk is higher. Let's start off with the easy one. Okay, if your brain shows the ravages of multiple infarctions, the evidence of prior hemorrhage, you're probably not a great candidate. But
Hmm.
the primary risk that you're starting to see ubiquitous screening for, encouraged by the FDA, but also encouraged by the fact that there is increased risk, is for the genetic risk. The issue with the the ApoE4, the ApoE gene, the Apo allele. And if you have an ApoE4 gene, your risk of Alzheimer's disease goes up quite a bit. Let's see, if you have one allele, you have 3 times the risk of Alzheimer's disease and an increased risk of ARIA, right?
Oh, okay.
If you
So
have,
an
if
increased
you,
risk for Alzheimer's disease, is that like a correlation that an increased risk for
oh,
Alzheimer's
absolutely,
also is
absolutely.
a
It's the
increased
matter
risk
of fact,
for ARIA?
the primary genetic risk for Alzheimer's disease is this ApoE4, variant. Okay, you can have
Okay. And
E2,
that
E3, or
also
E4.
implies a higher risk for ARIA itself.
It absolutely, it ties
Okay.
in together. And if you have both alleles, your risk of Alzheimer's disease is 12 times higher, but your risk of bleeding is even higher as well.
No,
It's
because
about,
I'm thinking of Tanenbaum, like from a lot of our listeners, are generally folks trying to commercialize AI as well. So, and the world of pharmaceuticals has always had this idea of companion diagnostics, and I wonder if you feel that there's an opportunity here of, say, a pre-therapy genetic test, then the therapy, and then the genetic test drives the post therapy frequency of the brain MR, or and then the AI as part of that whole workflow. Sorry, I suddenly can't hear you. uh no, I can't hear you, Dr. Anbo. My team, are you able to hear? One sec, I'll just check.
okay, I see. Let's see. Okay,
Oh,
now
yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah, now perfect. Yes, I can hear
talking through
you.
my computer speakers. Is that better?
Yeah, 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 perfect.
Okay,
Yes.
as long as you can hear me. So as I was saying, initially, it was thought that, genetic screening prior to these anti-amyloid therapies would be optional and uncommonly done. It seems that it is transitioning to becoming a requirement, certainly in academic sites, and it makes every bit of sense because your risks do go essentially much higher when you've got particularly both alleles of this genetic variant. And I think it is becoming almost required. Now, there are neurologists who are actually so fearful of complications and actually also concomitantly underwhelmed by the effect of these drugs that they don't want to put patients on these drugs. Colloquially, you hear roughly a third of neurologists aren't interested. On the other hand, the folks that want the benefits, that want their patients to get the benefits, are still fearful of the complications. Because again, it's uncommon for a neurologist to put a patient on a drug that theoretically could have catastrophic complications. So it's particularly important that we do our job well. We've emphasized the role of AI in this space, but we've also talked about the fact, and we're getting to the fact that yes, genetic screening is almost a requirement before you would start therapy, and I think will eventually become that requirement as well.
No, interesting. So Dr. Tanenbaum, Amit from my team, Dr. Amit Kumar Garg has asked a question. So I think we'll get to that. He asks, in your experience, could you tell us about any AI use cases that are not in the market yet, but you feel seem promising and breakthrough in the next few coming years?
Okay, are we staying on this topic? Why don't we start with this topic?
Yeah, of
And then,
course. I would love to get your thoughts
okay,
on
so
it.
let's start here, because we're talking about AIs in this space. And I mentioned that this is one circumstance where the FDA may eventually clear an application to be full CADx. We don't have a lot of those, right? I'm not sure we have any in the radiology space where it will allow you to not only quantify and detect, right? We have the triage apps. There's a large vessel occlusion call the team, right? We have the ability to find an abnormality, say on a mammogram, and point to it, detection. But it's rare, and it may actually be unprecedented, where you actually can not only do all of that with the case at the top of the pile, point at the lesion, but you actually can make the diagnosis. This is an example of ARIA. Okay. And there is a product going through the FDA process and could be cleared any day now that will be probably, if not the first, one of the first CADx applications. So I'm excited about that. What I'm really excited about in AI is less of the applications, stroke, hemorrhage, breast cancer, and the like. I'm excited about the spaces. The one diagnostic space that I'm really excited about is in opportunistic screening. We do an awful lot of CT scans, right? It's really exciting that we're pointing at being able to get a usable calcium score from a non-dedicated exam that might replace eventually the dedicated gated cardiac gating studies. I'm impressed with a tool that can actually detect compression fractures, a major cause of morbidity and mortality, incidentally on a chest CT or an abdominal pelvic CT, and by the same note, osteoporosis. Okay. I'm also impressed with tools that really assist us in the space where, in our darkest moments, particularly with the burden we carry now of doing more cases per day, of helping us detect things that are what I like to say is off search. Somebody might have called this incidental finding beforehand, but to me, I think of them as off search. We're doing an abdominal CT, let's say. We're following up a hepatocellular carcinoma. Okay, we're measuring lesions. We're evaluating physiology, but we're really not focused on the lung bases where there might be a lung nodule or a cancer sitting there. Or we're neuroradiologists cranking away at lumbar spine MRs all day long, the most common exam done on an MR. And the one slice that has the renal cell cancer, we might not notice because we're too focused on describing spinal stenosis, disc herniations, compression fractures, and the like. So I'm impressed with those types of tools. Probably the most commonly utilized tool in this space where important off-search findings will be detected would be, say, the PE tool that you see companies like ADoc doing. And that is, interestingly enough, most companies pitch their tools at radiologists. This will help you. This will help you do this. This will do that. Whereas the ADoc folks are actually going to the hospitals and saying, if we detect this PE before the patient goes home, you'll be able to, do the appropriate therapy while they're here, which of course is better for patients. But the folks that count beans at the C level will also say it's better for us because we get that revenue from that procedure. So it's really, really interesting. So I think opportunistic screening
I think if I
either there or coming. But there was one thing I wanted to talk about that we didn't get to yet. If you ask me an open-ended question, you're in real danger, as you probably figured out. Or what I'm genuinely excited about is the stealth AI that is based on large language models, natural language processing, where if you look for the first 7 years, there were companies in every space. We can predict no-shows. We can do utilization management. We can actually take the body of your report and write the conclusion. We can read your reports and see who hasn't come back and who has come back. And potentially we could read your reports and give you a version that the patient can read as well as the general practitioner can read, but won't be insulting and will have the information for the neurosurgeon. Now, as those are all interesting applications, right? But what I'm seeing now is those types of tools, which used to seem like individual apps and individual companies, are now becoming sort of AI-fueled plugins to the imaging industry. I like to think, you remember, if you ever seen the TV show Downton Abbey, which depicted a certain point in time, and during that series, they went from gas lamps on the wall to light bulbs, right? And when you walked into their place, they would say, wow, electricity, right? Today, you walk into a room and there's a light bulb on. You say, oh, there's a light bulb, right? To me, it's not about what's fueling these applications. It's about the applications. And I think that any organization that is preparing for the future is going to want an operating system, an ecosystem that plugs in these AI electricity-fueled applications throughout. Now, it's a little less exciting for people that are looking for individual applications, but I think it's really it's really forward thinking and understanding the industry to know where this electricity is going to take us.
No, I think on that point, Larry, there's a question that's just been asked in the chat box by Johan Liplik. I think he's from Brussels. And he says,
Is he allowed to ask questions on this broadcast?
sorry, is Johan allowed? Anybody can ask. Anybody can ask. And Johan is a friend. So he's asking, about the user friendliness of AI tools. A lot of individual AIs have their own interface. So what's your opinion on, like all of these multiple companies, multiple user interfaces, very closely tied to what you were saying?
That's such an interesting thing. And I've been looking from the top level, and you're taking me right down to the user level. And see, there is, I'm not going to answer your question directly, but I am going to point to the ultimate dilemma, right? How many AI tools are being marketed now as increasing the efficiency of the radiologist, right? That's a very interesting piece, because let's assume that you can prove it, and it actually exists, and you can prove it in a research trial, but a radiologist sitting at his desk knows whether a tool has made them more efficient. Okay. Yeah. And it's critically important to be able to get past that sniff test, that acid test. Okay. And unfortunately, it has been very difficult for many of these applications, moving upstream a bit, to prove definitively, at least in their materials, that there is time savings. Okay. And I think that's very, very important. I suspect for the most part, these applications are relatively easy to use. Top of your case, not top of your list, see the case. I think it's difficult for me. To me, it's a very difficult thing if an application says there's a lesion on slice 21 and I can't find it, because, that will just drives you completely up the wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that they're relatively easy to use. The key piece here is, understanding the shortcomings. Nothing's perfect. False positives, false negatives, they're different from human. False positives and false negatives, the combination, is generally pretty well endorsed as a positive thing. But the real question I want to get to is, let's assume that you've proven the efficiency is better. You're going to make your radiologist work. You're going to enable your radiologist to work, from, say, the chairman's perspective, 30% faster. Okay. Now let's move up to, because much of radiology now is being done in the private equity space. Some of them are in large organizations that are very heavily invested in the productivity of their team, reducing turnaround times, increasing productivity per day, because our volumes keep going up and that mismatch keeps getting worse. Let's assume that you have the ultimate tool, the magic, the holy grail, the Aladdin's lamp. You found it. It produces 30% more efficiency. Who's paying for it? I'm not talking about payers, right? I'm talking about who is going to pay for it. Is it the technical part of the organization that wants shorter turnaround times, wants more productivity? Or is it the radiologist side who just wants to be able to cope with their volume? The perspective on both sides is fairly, particularly on both sides, can be fairly mercenary. They want me to read more, supply this tool. Radiologists want to go home at the end of the day, buy the tool. It's a very difficult mercenary trade-off that, to my knowledge, has not been solved yet.
No, and I feel, Larry, that it's also not easy to buy the tool, right? Like, so that you can even, like, you can't really even give the choice to a radiologist or to one of these large companies, right? It's just the buying process itself is so difficult.
Which ties into where the platform companies fit in, right? So let me give you a pitch here, just for the last half a minute. Obviously, the contracting piece, the security piece, all of that piece would be incredibly daunting without platform companies like CARPL. And the evaluation process would be difficult as well. So there, I did your selling for you. I have 15 seconds left. I think it's a big deal.
We can, if you have a couple of minutes, we've got a question from Dr. Nicholas Spencer. He is the Chief Clinical Officer at AGFA, and from the UK, highly decorated radiologist there. So if you have a couple of minutes, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I have the time. I would like to know what radiologist decorations are.
Great, fantastic. So Dr. Spencer asks, can you comment on the progress towards silos of individual AI findings being brought together so that the sum is more than the parts?
Well, as a radiologist, we certainly can understand how that might come together, using our own intelligence and our skills. Perhaps, you can comment on how putting all these different pieces of inputs together are seen, because I haven't had that experience myself.
No, I think the way we look at it, Dr. Tanenbaum, is you look at a chest CT scan, right? You've got the incidental coronary artery calcification tool that can run on the same chest CT. You've got the incidental pulmonary embolism that can run on it. You've got the lung nodule solution that can run on it. You've got the, bone density model that can run on it. You've got the compression fracture that can run on it. There's a rib fracture tool, and all
A
you
lot of
now have.
information there.
Yeah, and you also have the lung capacity tools, your ILD tools. So there's just at least 4 to 6 different AI tools that exist in isolation that can be brought together. The challenge today in doing that remains regulation, right? Like how I don't even know if we're allowed to. Well, I know that we're not allowed to, but I don't know how we can be allowed to bring together those 6 different models into a way that a radiologist, when they're consuming that information, sees only one piece of information. So but yes, but there's immense advantage in this.
I agree. It's not going away. I think there's clear value. And again, there does need to be a fair amount of continuing to adjust and adapt over the next few years until we figure out how this forms its core role with everything that we're doing.
But great. No, thank you, Dr. Tanenbaum. Thank you to everybody who joined, and we will see you next week, same time, same ish place.
As
Thank
they
you.
say in American TV, same time, same channel.
Correct. See you, Dr. Tanenbaum. Thank you so much. Means a lot. Means a lot.